everyone, my name is Ellie Eberts, and today I am going to be showing you how I made my very own organza petticoat. I have worn so many petticoats in my time as a cosplayer or idol dancer, and I have tried everything to make my skirts floofy and happy. And I finally decided it was time to make my own petticoat. This one is both pink, which is my favorite color, and super duper fluffy. So let's go ahead, I'm going to show you how I made it. Let's go. So first things first, let's talk materials. I ordered 10 yards of 60-inch wide crystal organza for this petticoat. And honestly, I probably could have done with a bit more, but I would say 10 yards is the minimum. I'm going to be cutting this fabric into strips. You're going to want a rotary cutter for this because otherwise it'll take a million years. So I am cutting 5 strips that are 6 inches wide, 10 strips that are 7 inches wide, 15 strips that are 8 inches wide, and with the rest of the fabric, I am cutting strips that are 5 inches wide. Now, my petticoat is going to have 5 layers. There are 2 different terms that we're going to be talking about with this petticoat. We are talking about tiers, which is each level of ruffle on the petticoat. And then we are talking about layers, which is the number of layers. If I were lifting up each bit of the skirt, there are 5 total layers and 4 tiers on each layer. So each of these strips is going to become a tier in one of the layers. Looking at how many pieces of each of these we cut, I think you can kind of figure it out. Each layer is going to have 1 tier that is 6 inches wide by 1 width of my fabric, 1 tier that is 7 inches wide by 2 widths of my fabric, and then 1 tier that is 8 inches wide by 3 widths of my fabric, and then the ruffle at the bottom, which once folded over and ironed becomes 2 inches wide and is going to be as wide as possible. Now, it's very important when you're making a petticoat that you keep all your layers separate and labeled. Otherwise, you're gonna have no clue what is what. So here's a quick look at all of my layers. Look at all this pink fluffy goodness. It just makes me so happy to look at. Now I am going to start by working on the first tier of my skirt. This is the tier that is 6 inches wide by 60 inches long. I am simply stitching all of these strips into a circle. This will be the top tier of our petticoat. Now what I'm doing here, I believe this is called continuous stitching. This is something you'll see quilters do a lot. When the stitches are straight and simple, there's not a lot of detail to them. So I am simply trying to stitch as many of these pieces at once as possible. Once they've been stitched together, I'm trimming off my seam allowance, pressing them, and stitching again to create a French seam. And again, I'm going to be using continuous stitching. Here you can see a better look. You simply finish one stitch, lift your presser foot, and then put in the next stitch. Here's a little time lapse of the second tier. So here I am connecting 2 pieces of this fabric together. So each of this tier has 2 lengths of fabric that are 7 inches wide by 60 inches. Now, as you can tell, this is kind of an arduous process. My footage for this petticoat was 2 hours long unedited, and that wasn't even the entire petticoat. I only filmed 1 piece of each step. So this is not a quick and easy project. This is gonna take a couple days, so don't go into this thinking you can make a petticoat in a couple hours. It's not gonna happen. So I'm going to repeat this process for all of my tiers until we have a whole bunch of tiers for our petticoat. Now we get to start attaching the tiers to each other to create our layers. I always suggest working from the bottom up when you are attaching your tiers together. I've tried it the opposite way and it was a pain to work with, so work from the bottom up. Here I am laying out my third tier. So this is my widest tier. I am laying it out and marking it in fourths. So I've put a pin in every fourth of this tier. Next, I am going to be attaching my bottom tier, which, like I said, has been pressed in half. So it is now about 2 inches wide. And we are going to also be marking this tier into fourths. Now, these pins are going to match up, and we are going to match up each fourth of our tier, right? See where we're going here? So now everything is evenly spaced. If you had a ruffler foot or a serger, which automatically gathers, you could auto gather this and life would be great. However, I decided I was going to manually gather this. That way, all my tiers were very evenly spaced and I didn't have to worry about ruffling something on a serger and then not having enough of it. All right, so now that I have divided my ruffle and placed it onto my third tier, I'm gonna go ahead and stitch this together. Like I said, I am manually gathering this tier onto the previous tier. So it is bit by bit, you go a little stitch, you do a little pleat, you do a little more, you do a little pleat, you do a little more, you do a little pleat. It's a bit of a process, but I found that I found my own rhythm, and by the end, I could do a tier in, gosh, maybe 10 minutes rather than the 30 that it took me for the first tier. Once my fourth tier is stitched onto my third tier, I'm going to trim off any extra seam allowance that is flopping around on there. You want to try and keep it as even as possible when you're stitching, but it's okay if you don't, you can always trim off the excess. Once that excess has been trimmed off, I'm going to finish this seam. Now, if you had a serger, you could simply serge along this and it would look beautiful. I don't have a serger, so I am using a very tight zigzag stitch and simply zigzagging right along the edge of my material. This is going to lock this into place and make it so my organza isn't fraying everywhere. Now, here you can see this finished stitch. It's not perfect, a serger would look better, but it looks pretty good. So here is what our ruffly tier looks like unironed. I'm gonna go ahead and iron this real quick, and there it is. It looks really nice once it's pressed. Now I am going to repeat this process for all of my tiers and then for all of my layers. So this is where the bulk of the time is, gathering these pieces onto each other. But once you've done so, you're going to have 5 very cute and very ruffly layers. So first, I'm going to baste together 2 of my layers. I'm going to try and keep the waist as even as possible, and if you cut your pieces evenly, then this should mean that the hem of your petticoat is even as well. After that, I am going to add little loops of horsehair. This horsehair is to help with the lift and to make sure that your petticoat doesn't deflate. So I made about 5 or 6 of these loops and I placed them evenly around the waist of my petticoat. Next, I'm going to baste together my final 3 layers. Once our second set of layers is basted together, we can now connect that to our first set of layers as well. So the second set of layers will go on top, covering that horsehair braid. Now this is where our petticoat really starts to look like a petticoat. At this point, I'm going to be adding my waistband. I'm using this really cute strawberry print cotton, but you could use any material you like. This is a 2-inch wide waistband, so I cut my material at 5 inches, pressed it in half, and then pressed the edges over as well. So I am simply stitching this onto my petticoat. And then I am going to fold over the other edge of this waistband and stitch in the ditch. But first we need to add our elastic. I'm going to have an elastic waistband and a ribbon tie for this petticoat to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. So I am inserting my elastic circle that I made to be the same size as my waist, as well as my ribbon, which I made to be quite a bit longer than my waist, so that way it can be tied. Now, you might be asking how this ribbon comes out of the waistband. Well, I did put 2 buttonholes into my waistband that I forgot to record. But there are 2 buttonholes that'll sit at the front of the petticoat for the ribbon to come out and be tied through. Once your ribbon and elastic are situated inside that waistband, you can go ahead and stitch in the ditch to finish off the waistband, and voila! We have an adorable, super fluffy petticoat. Now, I used this petticoat for my strawberry wedding dress Ichigo cosplay, but you could use this petticoat for anything. Since this was made for a wedding dress cosplay, it is a little bit longer. This hits just a couple inches above my knee. When my normal petticoats that I wear are maybe 7 or 8 inches above my knee, they're pretty short because that's kind of the more anime and idol look. So if you were making this for an idol cosplay, I would definitely shorten up your tiers, or you could remove one of the tiers altogether to make it a bit shorter. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really love this petticoat. It's super fluffy and cute, and it makes me so happy every time I wear it. I think I'm gonna get a lot of great use out of it. If you want to learn more about how I made this petticoat and see a full written tutorial, you can hop on over to my Patreon. That tutorial should be live right now, so go check it out if you're interested. If you have any questions on how I made this petticoat, be sure to leave them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. If you found this video useful, of course, leave a thumbs up, and please also subscribe. It means the world to me. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And until next time, be sure to keep sewing, stay positive, and have fun. I'll see you later. Bye!